Hi there, welcome to How to D&D. My name's Frederick Weller and today I want to review, or at least do a flip through, of Volo's Guide to Monsters. The first thing you notice about Volo's Guide to Monsters is the artwork continues to be incredible. There is a limited edition version which has a mind flayer on it. It's a limited run, there's one run, you have to purchase it from the stores itself. I haven't purchased the limited edition, I wanted this version with this particular artwork on it. It's a little bit more expensive, the limited edition. You will find as I flip through here, the amount of content is enormous. It's got a lot of stuff in here. There's the usual disclaimer. I'm not going to bother reading it because actually it's not as interesting as some of the other disclaimers have been, and sort of let's make this video a bit longer. The contents page is broken up into 3 parts. You have a section for monster lore, character races, and then there's the bestiary. And then you have the index actually right underneath the contents page, so it's not at the back, it's in the front. It talks about Volo being an explorer who writes books, not particularly good books and not particularly accurate, but yes, he's actually a character that's part of the Forgotten Realms world. The first section here on monster lore is on beholders, and it goes into pretty much everything you would need to know. It talks about the birth of beholders, it talks about how solitary they are, eye tyrants is included in here. There are a discussion about the hive of a beholder, and then you've got your beholder kin, so different types of beholders. You can actually roll up some random stats and actually create a beholder that you want. Pretty much, change its size, give it a certain number of eye stalks, shape, texture, all that sort of thing. But this is the really good part here. It gives you a section on what a beholder might be like in terms of personality, ideals, bonds, and flaws. And it gives you a chart for names. So if you're not too sure how to create a name for a beholder, you've got a few options here. There are tactics, so how to actually use the beholder's eye stalks and their rays, how to use anti-magic, and it goes into it in quite a lot of detail in terms of how to construct that and use that, legendary actions, what sort of minions, what sort of traps they would have. There's a section further on that also gives you quite a few examples of the different types of traps that you would come across. It gives you a section on lairs, which is really, really helpful. We've got a picture in here, which I'll show you in a second. It talks about escape tunnels and how beholders create them. Eyes in the sky, as I said, the type of chambers you would come across, like prisons, sanctums, a vestibule, and a minion sort of chamber. And this here covers traps, like door traps, cover traps, ceiling gas, stuff like that. There is a section that talks about sort of the trophy section of a beholder, and sort of how to leave the lair. You can see there is a wonderful and quite pretty illustration of what a lair for a beholder might look like. Now you could just use this, or you could modify it for your own use. There is also a section about treasure. What would you expect to find in a beholder lair in terms of treasure? It gives you some examples of minions. You can actually roll up randomly to determine what sort of minions your beholder has for your lair, what sort of pets they have. It talks about how they are megalomaniacs, which is quite helpful too. So very much fluff. This is a fluff book, the first part anyway. Then you got the world shakers, that's the giants. So it goes into the first impressions of giants, what to sort of expect. It talks about the children of the All-Father. It talks about their great pantheon. So this is going to tie in really nicely with the Storm King's Thunder adventure. A lot of giant history. There's a section here on giant tongue, so it's language. There's sections on rune magic and magic in general. There's a section here on what you would find in a giant's bag, of all things. Okay, what sort of life does a giant live? So it gives you some sort of information, how long they live to. It's detailed here. How to role play a giant. This is really good. I'm glad they've done this. So there's traits, personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws as usual. It talks about the cloud giants and goes through all the major giants. Gives you some examples of the Adaining and information around that for each of the giant races. So fire giants, hill giants, stone giants, storm giants, they're all covered. You have repeat artwork in here, so if you're expecting all the artwork to be original and never been seen before, I'm afraid that's not going to be the case. There's a section on gnolls and their hunger. It talks about their god and the gifts that they gain from that. How they interact with the world, then tactics, that they are butchers, that they butcher the weak, and they strive for strength. They are very demonic gnolls anyway. There is a section here too on their language. Also talks about what sort of treasure you would expect from a gnoll. Breaks things down into personality traits, ideals, bonds and flaws again for gnolls, and gives you some example names. It also gives you sort of the anatomy of a warband that a gnoll pack might have, you know, how it's made up of a lord, a fang and so forth. There's also a breakdown of the sort of different cults that gnolls get involved in. Okay, what sort of allies do gnolls have? There's a section on that. Composition. So it gives you an awful lot of information. There's no lair for gnolls, so I'm assuming they decided that wasn't quite as important. There's a discussion about goblins. I suppose that's really more helpful because you're going to come across goblins more than anything else. Discuss their family masses, how they're gatherers and hunters. There is status symbols, there's like a chart. There's a lot of charts in this book, I've noticed. It also talks about the types of lairs that a goblin might have. Bugbears are discussed, hobgoblins, all of these things. They don't get an awful lot of time in the book. It's sort of swept over pretty quickly. It's a nice looking castle there. One of the things I have noticed is the lore section is quite large. So this gives you like a goblinoid war camp. It breaks things down into libraries, pens, pits, stuff like that. There is another section on hags, and it gives you, again, all the information you need to sort of role play that. It also talks about their magic. There's even a section here on mounts and vehicles. So if you want to get involved in some really weird stuff, then you've got a whole bunch of different information on that. Literally a cauldron with legs. Talks about the hag lair actions and what you would how you would manage them. Treasure is discussed again. They've got an example of a hag lair. I mean, all hag lairs are likely to be slightly different, but there's a couple of examples here. Regional effects, their pets and their minions, who they would have under their control. And again, more information on treasure you would expect in their lairs. There's a section on the little dragons, which is the kobolds, how they are expert tunnelers and able scavengers. And of course, always servants to some sort of dragon if they can. Talks about their magic, their life, their outlook, what they hate. Examples again of names for kobolds, the different environments they sort of interact with, different colour patterns that they can have, treasure, and their allies, minions and pets again. And it keeps going on like this. We've got another kobold lair. I'm not particularly interested in the kobold lair, but I mean, you could use this. It talks about the sort of different sections for growing fungus, putting out mines, because kobolds are all about setting traps, aren't they? Sleeping areas, throne rooms, escape tunnels, stuff like that. Survival skills are discussed. There is a section here on mine flayers, so this is actually really helpful, and there's a beautiful map in here that illustrates how a hive would be built. It talks about the elder brain, what sort of enemies. There's a grand design for all mine flayers, so it discusses how that works. And again, there's that personality and roleplay information, as well as names for actually naming your mine flayers. It talks about how they speak, their thralls, you know, who their minions are, and gives you a whole bunch of different examples that you can sort of use in your game. Covers the monster lair again, intellect devourers. You have each of your maps are sort of broken up. They give you like a small bite-sized piece that sort of explains what they would be like, which is actually really helpful. So this is basically the Mind Flayer colony, and it includes the Elder Brain and sort of all the different sort of chambers that come off that. It talks about their magic, treasure again, covers orcs. I mean, you've got to have orcs in any game really, but war wagons. It talks about how to role play them again, names for orcs, talks about half orcs, how they're involved, gives you a stronghold, gives you information on treasure. There's the Yanti, the snake people, goes over their gods, their culture and their empires, how their society is structured, what their motivations are, more sort of how to build a Yanti so that, you know, it's got a little bit of a different look. Role play stuff again, more information on how to name your monster, a temple. So once we get past that, we get into the character races. This is the sort of stuff that most of the players are really going to be more interested in. And here, it covers a few examples. So you've got the Aasimar. Now the Aasimar was already in the Dungeon Master's Guide, so it's a repeat. But what they have done is they've given you a few sort of sub-races. So you've got a couple more options here. The Furbolg, I don't know too much about them, but yes, you can play one of these if you wanted to. They have a hidden step ability, and they are able to speak with beasts and leaf, which is a little bit strange. The Goliath, now the Goliath is a repeat. It was in the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, so they have repeated this, and I suppose it's so that it doesn't get lost, but I don't kind of see the point in repeating a piece of information that we already can get from some of the document. The Kenku, that's a nice addition. That's the sort of like the bird people. We have lizard folk, so if you want to play a lizard folk you can. You've got sort of quirks, how to build their stat blocks. The Tabaxi, now that's basically like a cat person, and it gives you a lot of information on that. A lot of these races are actually quite powerful, and I can see you can have some problems with your Dungeon Master if you want to play these sort of these extended races, because they are so strong they might not allow it. There's the Triton, which is basically like Aquaman, you know, you live under the sea, you have a spear. There is one spell that has been included. This is the only spell that I've seen so far in the book, and it is a Wall of Water, and it can only be cast by a Triton. Now, you can also play monstrous creatures, such as a bugbear, hobgoblins, goblins, kobolds. It gives you all the information. It's not an awful lot of information, it's just enough to get by, really. Orc traits, so if you want to play an orc or yunti, and it gives you a breakdown of you know, how to develop their weights and heights. This is really the big section that most people want to look at, and that is the bestiary. So as you can see, a lot of the Band of Hob, there's a lot of repeats of monsters we've seen in the past. Garth, I saw this from 4th edition. Death Kiss, a Gazer, Bodak, all laid out very much like we've seen in past monster manuals, or the one that we've come across so far, the one that's been printed. Cave Fisher, I never really used Cave Fishers that much, but they're alright. Triton, Cranium Rats, swarms of Cranium Rats, that sounds bad. Darklings, and yes, Demon Maw, Devourers. This is really good. This section here, it actually gives you a whole lot more dinosaurs. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more dinosaurs. You've got raptors, stegosaurus, stuff like that. That sort of expands. I actually like this part of the book the most. The flail snail I can never really understand. It's the weirdest creature I've ever seen in a while. The frog hemoth is cool. It's got a tentacle attack, it's got multiple attacks, a bite, tongue attack, and a little bit of information on it. This is where things get really good. There is a whole section here on giants. Each giant race is included, and these giants are actually more powerful than the standard ones you saw in the monster manual. Slightly different too. The Grillion. Now, this is one monster I was hoping to have an official stat on, and now I finally have it, and a bit of information too, which is good. They also do this a lot. They're using the 4th edition player's monster manual layout, and they give you, like, if you get a knoll, you might get 3 different types of knolls, and you know, you pick the one you want to use. The Grunk, strange looking creature there. Guard Drake, now they give you a basic stat block and then a whole lot of variants for it. Hags, now we've got 2 more hags in here. We've got hobgoblins, and they give you 2 different versions of that. Kobolds, now they don't just give you one kobold, they give you an inventor, a sorcerer. If you look back here, there was a dragon shield. These are actually already been showing up in other supplements, so they like repeats actually. Mind flayers, it gives you, would you believe it, there's actually the Elder Brain statted out, which is awesome. I love that. I think in terms of a monster manual, that this is the bit I really wanted the most, and yet it isn't the biggest part of the book. Orcs, there's a whole bunch of different orcs. They've got a quickling in here. Red caps, I needed to use red caps not so long ago. I didn't have a stat block for it, and I couldn't find it in the supplement I was supposed to be using it with, which is weird. This is where things get a little bit odd. A lot of these monsters, like the slithering tracker, really nasty looking creature, but I'm not sure where they've come from. Are they past 8th edition monsters or not? The Ghoul, now I remember these are going to cause a lot of trouble for players. It's like basically head with wings, and they start off on somebody's body, and yes, they can wind up breaking off your body and flying away. That's actually great. I actually like the idea that they had the veggie pygmy in there, because that was quite sort of different. The Woodwode, we're almost at the end here. So, Yunti again, a whole bunch of them, different options. This is where things really sort of unfold, and we get some problems here in that we are given basically a cow and sort of like a tough looking, what do you call it? It's like a buffalo, I guess. They just called it something else. And they give you a dolphin. This is a great section. I don't understand why it's in the bestiary section. It's a swarm of rot grubs. Now that's going to cause a lot of trouble. I can see a lot of players getting to the bestiary section looking for beasts, and there's just not too many options for them. You know, there was a whole lot of other beasts they could have included. So, I mean, we still don't have a tortoise, we don't have a seal. I'm pretty sure we don't have a whale, camel, duck, kangaroo, giraffe, all that sort of stuff. They've really only given us, well, truthfully, 3, and 2 of them are almost sort of the same sort of thing. The non-player character section is pretty good. This pretty much gives you all the classes broken up into low-level CR ratings up to high-level CR ratings. And Blackguard in here, bards, archdruids, conjurers, champions, enchanters, a kraken priest, illusionists, invokers. We've got a swashbuckler, we've got a martial arts adept. Now I'm really happy about this because now I don't have to do any work. A necromancer is in here. We've got warlocks of the Fiend. Basically you've got a warlock for everything you need. There's like 3 of them here. Transmuters, a war priest. And then at the end here it breaks things down. You get basically the monsters broken down by creature type, followed by their challenge rating is another section, breaking them down by challenge rating, and then by their environment. And this is really helpful. This is the sort of stuff that should have been in the original monster manual and it wasn't. And yes, that is pretty much the whole thing. What I will say about this book is it's not the product I was hoping for. It's not a terrible product. I will probably wind up having this on me more likely than having the Dungeon Master Guide with me, because I use my monster manual and my player's handbook all the time. This book is not really designed for players. It's only got a couple of sections in here, and they're going to feel a little bit cheated. Dungeon Master is going to probably benefit more from this book than anybody else. Something I need you to prepare yourselves for is I've already had a few of my friends mention that the book is showing signs of the spine or binding coming loose. So be prepared for your book to fall apart. Let's hope it doesn't. There are also comments within the book by Elminster commenting on Volo's guide, and they are pretty much dissing him. Volo's Guide to Monsters is a very different product. We haven't seen Wizards of the Coast produce a book like this in the past. It is a source book, it is a monster manual, it is a Dungeon Master's Guide, and there is a sort of element of a player's handbook in there as well. If you found this video helpful, and I hope that you have, please share, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make a comment below and tell me, is there any questions you had on Volo's Guide to Monsters, and I'll look through the book and try to answer those questions if you have any very specific questions. Until next time, keep rolling those 20s.